So welcome, everyone. I have had so much fun putting this together. And I hadn't looked at this study that we did in 1970. Actually, it was 79 for years. And looking and reviewing these horses has been amazing. And now what I have to do is share the screen. Oh, Shannon, I'm going to make you a co-host. I'm going to make you a co-host so you can help if we need it. Just a second. I've got to go again to participants. One more. Almost. And wow. Where the heck are you? Hey, Cassandra Crawley, I see your name. Fabulous. Okay, you must be way down, Shannon. Yeah. Don't on it. Just sit there and count your blessings and imagine you're with your horses. And as we go through these, you can imagine bringing them into this session. I am trying to find you, Shannon, and I'm scrolling from the top to the bottom and don't find you. So one more pass. Yeah.
Can I, if I make a comment, then perhaps I'll be visible for you.
You are? No, it's not. I see you here, but I'm going through the list of names to find you.
You can search the participant list all the way on top. It has a search.
Oh, thank you.
So you can type Shannon there.
Leanna, I should make you co-host too. Thank you. Thank you. Great. Okay. More. Okay, Shan, now in case. Oops. Almost. Okay. Now, folks, I'm going to stop this recording and start over because this was too much of a mess. If you will bear with me a moment. I'm going to stop the recording. And now I'm going to start it again. Oops. Okay. Because if you signed up for this and you want to get come on. This is really interesting. Okay. We're going to have to wait a moment. I'll just cut the first part of this off. You're going to have a few minutes while you'll run forward. Okie doke. So welcome. This is we're going to take you a journey back in time to 1979. And this was a 5-week study. Actually, I'm going to share the screen. And get this up here for you. Okay. This was a 5-week study we did in 1979 with horses that came to the Raken Test Center in Germany as a result of an advertisement in the horse magazine Fright Item Saddle, Free Time in the Saddle. And it was organized by Ursula Bruns. And the reason that she did this, she had seen an article that Wentworth, my first husband, and I wrote in Western Horseman. And she wrote to me and asked if she could come to visit my school because we had a 9-month residential training for riding instructors and trainers from 1974 till 64 till 74 rather. And we had students from 9 countries and 36 states who were in residence with us. And Shannon Weil, who's down on, you can see here, she was in the class of 1969, and she's written a book about it, which is just going to be in Audible in about 10 days. And it's called Strike a Long Trot, and it's the story of my school. It's the background behind what's all this work. So Ursula Bruns came in and spent 6 weeks, and I showed her all around California and all the stuff that, we did with horses that was so different from Germany. I mean, she'd never seen horse stalls that had paddocks before. Can you imagine? Because most of the horses at the time in Germany were kept in stables. And many of them still, at that time, still in tie stalls, which is really interesting. And so she was very impressed, and she went home and she developed a program called the Bruns Bear program, and it was for beginning adult riders. And it was a really wonderful course that's still going on today. And so here is a picture of her. And if it wasn't for Ursula, this would never have happened. So what happened, I went to visit her in 74, and I was, let's see, Roger, I'm going to find you. Roger Russell was with me. We were together at the time, and we've been great friends ever since. And we were on our way actually to Africa, but Ursula Bruns talked me into doing a presentation for Equitana, which I think most of you must have heard of. It's the world's largest horse expo. And so I took 4 horses, myself and Roger, who's here, and 2 other of Ursula Bruns' young riders. They were 15 at the time. One of them now heads the Rake Test Center after all these years, Johann Schumacher. And we showed jumping and in a quadrille with 4 horses with no bridles, which had never been shown before in Germany. And now everybody does it. And what was so interesting is that magazines wrote about it, a lot of magazines. And the biggest magazine, Rider Review, wrote that everybody's going to be killed. We think the way the horses do this is that at night, Linda must tie their tongues down so that they were so happy when they're free that they'll do anything. Honest you all, that was true. Truly said, wasn't true what we did. And it was so much fun. And Christine Schwartz is here with us also. She was at that first Equitana, which is so incredible. And now then she came, and she's also in this study that we did. So after Equitana, it was a really big impression that was made by our presentation. And so I was asked to do workshops. So I stayed around and started doing workshops. And I was really happy because I had by then shut the school down, and I was on the road, so to speak, just to see what the world would bring to me, because I felt that there was something special I had to do, and I couldn't do it if I just kept the school going and kept teaching. I wanted to learn. So anyway, I did these workshops, and I began to work horses at the Rake Test Center for Ursula Bruns, and she saw the changes that were made without the usual lunging them till they're tired, or in this country and now in Germany too, running around the round pen until they give in, so to speak. And so after, I don't know, this was 1979, and Roger and I had been living in Germany at the time, teaching, and Feldenkrais and this program. And Ursula said, Linda, you have to have a method of this. And so she put out this ad and gathered together 20 horses, 12 horses for 3 weeks, and 2 horses and 8 horses for 2 weeks. And the people we had helping were amateur horse people. They couldn't, they didn't have experience training horses. And the idea was we would go through all these different ground exercises that we had developed to that point, and just see what happened to the horses. And one of the reasons that we were using groundwork actually came as one of these, sort of so-called accidents that happen. I was giving in 19 1975 at Equitana, I gave the presentation jumping and doing this quadrille with no bridles, nothing on the horse's head. And then the next year I imported, I think the next year was Babrixa, a quarter horse mare, and I gave the first trail horse class exhibition at Equitana. And so then I started doing workshops for training trail horses. And in one of these workshops that was, we had a Icelandic horse that, as I remember, had a cough. And so she couldn't be ridden. And he was really difficult under saddle. One of these horses that would freeze and then bolt. So we worked him through all the obstacles that we were normally riding through. We worked him through them from the ground. And then the woman went home and she kept doing it because it was making such a difference. And she wrote to me sometime later and said, you know, by the time I rode my horse, which is maybe a month later after the cough was over, he was totally okay. He wasn't freezing and bolting anymore. Listen, you all, this is before we were doing any body work at all. So then we gathered the horses, and I've got this collection of horses I want to show you. This is the first horse. This is I thought it was Dorley, but Christine, we were just talking earlier, and I found out it isn't. And Christine, if you could unmute yourself, and I'm going to put you on. And Christine, if you would just tell people about, you know, the first time that you saw me at Equitana, and then what this was like, because this horse came because she was sent because she was really miserable to be groomed and really hard to ride. And the owner, she's a very well-bred mare, and the owner had only 2 horses and 1 groom was hired, and they were groomed a lot. And it was really, you know, fashionable and thought to be correct to groom a horse, you know, with this 33, I forget how many, 13 currycomb marks on the wall. That means with a metal currycomb. And she, when you approached her, I remember now, within 3 feet, she'd started, you know, threatening you because she was so sore in the body. And so, Christine, I'm going to have you unmute yourself. And
okay, I've done. I'm unmuted. Thank you. Yeah, I certainly remember her well, because she was kind of the most threatening of all the horses there, and the one we all kind of stayed away from in the beginning. Because if you, as Linda said, if you went anywhere near her and she thought you might groom her, she would start trying to bite, and she couldn't stand still at all. And so we did groundwork with her, and certainly she was much better when she had sort of a task, if I remember that correctly, and did well with the groundwork. But then as soon as you took her back into any kind of a area where she thought she might get groomed, she would get really defensive again. So Linda actually started doing some body work with her. And at the time, we were there to learn and to see if we can get these horses past these big issues they had, because every horse had a different issue that came to the 5 weeks. The idea was to see how the groundwork can get them through the things, through their problems. And this mare, Linda said, well, this horse also needs some body work. But at that time, only Linda could do it, because it was like Linda's magic that made the changes. And so we were all just watching and absorbing what Linda was doing with her hands, and then sneaking in a few of the things ourselves as well, and realizing that yeah, how well the combination actually worked, even though the touch wasn't the official part of the work yet.
yeah, there were no
And she
circuits
was we did also then ride her, and in this picture I'm riding her in a roller bit. And she's like really nice and soft there. And she was, I don't totally remember all her issues under saddle, but she was just a very grumpy horse. And I ended up taking her home. The owner actually gave her to me, because even though the owners all came on the last day and he could see the changes in her, I don't think he thought they would stick. So he gave me the horse, and I ended up taking her home. And riding her with a neck ring, so it was fun.
right. And so that the thing that we want to really make it clear to those of you who don't know the work and know us. None of the work that we do ever involves punishing a horse or getting after them for pinning their ears, because it doesn't work. And what we had to do with her, that's where we started Taming the Tiger, wasn't it? Where we're doing that some with her. And
Right,
you'll,
yeah.
yeah, so that it's like a half cross tie. You put a long, like we use a 15-foot rope, tie it to the right side of the halter, and then run it through a ring in the stall, and then back through the bottom ring of the halter, and then to your hand. And then you have another lead rope on the left side of the halter, so that you can keep the horse in place, keep them from coming, biting you, but you can also completely give them their head so they can turn back and look at you, which is what we encourage them to do, and so that they communicate. And so I'm going to move on to the next horse, which this was a horse that was sent because you can see she was really high-headed, and this is her owner, really tight martingale, and they had the noseband really tight, and they just kept tightening it more and more. And of course, she got more and more in bane. So she was unrideable by this person. She considered her to be too dangerous. This is after 3 weeks. And this is riding with, we didn't have the neck rings we have now. We had to make it from wire, and we just padded the wire at the bottom. We wrapped it. And this is the mare going really nicely. She was very good mare. Now, what we did with these horses, we put them through all kinds of ground exercises and barrels. We had like 8 barrels in that arena, and we'd put the barrels sometimes in the labyrinth, the form of labyrinth, and sometimes just in the square. And we worked the horses around the barrels, which what we found with some of them, they were really afraid of them. And we could put hay on top of the barrels. Sometimes in those years, we were still using grain, which I quit using after a while because many horses are actually allergic to it. So, and it's too high value of feed. So that's why we wound up putting hay. Now, this is Christine taking this mare who's really skittish, really couldn't slow her down without the head coming up. And, in Germany at the time, and unfortunately, I still run into it from time to time, is a concept that you want 30 pounds in your hand, the weight of the reins. That's what used to be said, 30 pounds in the hand, which you can imagine on the bars of the horse's mouth makes a lot of discomfort. So horses are not going to be easy. So this is one of the things we use tires. We don't use them anymore because, I don't know why, because they're really useful. And so this is like one of the sessions where you put the front feet in, and then you walk through and put the back feet in, and you put them between poles. So we give the horse boundaries. And in those days, I didn't understand that boundaries, how important boundaries are. That's one of the primary values of the labyrinth that we now use. It gives the horse boundaries. And you can take a horse that is flipping out and not focused and not staying with you and just walk in that labyrinth. And I have a little dog that's telling me that he has, Griffey, can you back up? Sorry.
But while you're doing that, I think we don't use the tires anymore because actually we sometimes still use the tires cut in half, sort of like a bagel, because the horse can get his shoe caught on the rim.
Didn't we go to bicycle tires because of that after a while? That's
Yeah, but they can also get caught on that, right? And then really scare themselves. Like at the farm, at Robin's farm, we have tires that are cut like a bagel. So the inside rim actually touches the ground. So the horse
good
can't get
idea.
caught
Yeah.
on that.
Right. Yep. And that's the one thing we're really watching all the time. If you excuse me 1 second, I've got a Griffin, hold on a minute. Excuse me. Come on. Come on. Roland, can you please let the dogs out? Griffin has to go. I'm out. He really lets me know when it's time. Okay. For those of you who don't know, he's a Chinese crested. So one of the things we really pay attention to is safety. And this is another reason we don't do this. Holy moly. You see, this is Christine. Now, this is something that we built there at Raiken. We had this sloping thing and you had poles on it, and we had slots for the poles. But to have a person stepping in with that horse is way too dangerous. Holy moly. You know, if she pulls back, you can really get hurt, obviously. And she's afraid. So this is like probably one of the first days she's ridden, handled from the ground. And what we would do now is, first of all, just start so she's on the ground, just stopping and starting and staying back as before you put them through any kind of obstacles. Remember, this is the first probe that we did. And so we don't do this. Do not do this. Okay, so now I just want to let you kind of go over. So we had poles like this where they step between them. We crossed the poles. We had a bridge. We had a teeter-totter, which I don't get to use much anymore because usually we're doing it in arenas that don't have them, but they're really nice to have because horses love going on those teeter-totters. And one of the things the horses had to do by the end of the 3 weeks or the 2 weeks, they had to go over all of these obstacles with the person with nothing on their heads. And you'll see that in some of these. So if you have, I'll keep going. Now this is another horse. Holy moly, was this challenging horse. He was brought by this guy on the right, and you'll not believe this, but last year at Equitana, was Equitana this year? Whenever the last Equitana was, he came to me after all these years. This is 69. He came to me and what year was it? 79, right? 79, sorry. He came to me to tell me about this horse. He and his new wife had bought this horse from a killer pen, and the horse, they had enough money to send him for 1 week, but you'll see these pictures in a minute. 1 month, 1 month was not enough. So I kept the horse for another month without charging him. And he wound up in endurance riding him very successfully. He was sore on every part of his body. And here he's just practicing some work on his neck because the horse was so sore in this whole head and the whole neck.
He actually has no weight on his hind feet. They're both not on the ground properly, just the toes.
Right, because he was so sore. And all I'm doing is putting pressure right there on the pelvis, a little pressure, and he just like knuckled and dropped off his, knicked. What do you call it in English? I don't know what you call it. Suddenly went onto his toes. So, but I want you to look at this horse's head, you all. Poor horse. You see this sloping nose that he has. This is a horse that will really have a hard time getting along with most people. These are usually when he's lucky enough to find a person who understands him, he may be able to get along with one horse. He's really has it, of course, a dull eye, which you would because he's in so much pain in the body. And if you think about most training, if a horse is like disobedient like this is the first day, one of the young riders got on him and he was just terrified. Look at his ears, look at his eye, look at his nostrils, look at his lip and extended. This is a point of terror. And the reason that we were riding these horses in Western saddles, we had so many sore-backed horses, and a Western saddle that fits well is so much better for them than an English saddle on a horse with a sore back. So that was like in the beginning. And then these are the things that we were doing. Now this is Roger. There I am running him, leading him, and Roger's ground driving him. And we did a lot of ground driving in those. Today, how we've changed it now is we have a person always at the head because, and can you see that's a loose line? You don't want to be pulling them. You have to be really fast. And here's Roger. Oops. Oh, there he is, driving him alone. And we didn't drive on a bit, and we drove through the Western Saddle like this. It's just really easy. Today, what I do with that, I use an English saddle if you don't have a surcingle, and we run the stirrups up and drive it, put the driving lines a little higher up on the saddle so you get a better line. This is too much of a downward line, but it really worked. And we're working between all these barrels, and the horse is starting to listen and have a nicer experience. And this is me riding him. At what point, I don't know. This is our training bit. And wait, you got to see, this is when he took him home. Let me see if I can raise this a little. And we're not seeing the whole thing here. There. He did really well with this horse. And he turned out to be very happy. Look at the change in his neck. When you bring a horse into the body and they feel safe and you can touch them anywhere and have them like it, you see that even the shape of his face has changed. It's just so interesting with this guy. And I can't believe that he came to me this year after all these years. And he was very successful with him in endurance riding. Now let's go back here. Roger, do you want to come on? Do you remember Dutch by any chance? You want to unmute yourself and come on so I can introduce you?
Hi, everybody. I remember Dutch very well. He was really frightened. Actually, as I recall, he and the owner and his wife said, if you guys can't help him, he's going to the slaughterhouse. Yeah. And he's just super touchy. And it was quite a pleasure. I'm thrilled that the owner was so happy with him. And of course, Dutch was happy that worked out so well for them. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting that he came to our stand at Equitana this year?
Yeah, amazing.
I even recognized him. I mean, I didn't remember what horse, but I recognized him. And it was really great.
Essentially 48 years. Yeah.
So can you remember any of the things that we did? Like we used these barrels driving around between the barrels. And at one point when we were lunging him, we were using the barrels as a barrier because he didn't lunge at all in the beginning. And that's interesting. One of the ways that we got him staying out on the line, we do it very differently today. What do you remember?
I remember him very well. It's interesting to see these and know that you've developed all these techniques much farther than those were still in experimental times when we were trying things out. I remember the first time in 1975 when we were in San Francisco with Moshe Feldenkrais, we had, was it 5 Arab mares down on Palo Alto somewhere? Yeah.
Right.
And Moshe had been talking about non-habitual movements that we were doing ourselves in the training with Moshe. And you said, that's it. We're going to go down and work with the mares and try out everything that's non-habitual to them. And that's how some of this Tellington touch body techniques evolved, is with those horses in 1975. And then,
well, what happened, and I've written about it a lot since, there was one mare that was 16 years old and had been a brood mare. And the thing is that Moshe said, what I remembered him saying is that it's possible for a human to learn in one experience using gentle non-habitual movements that activate new neural pathways to the brain that enhance their ability to learn. Because that was my experience of Moshe. His passion was learning. And I thought, I was lying on the floor doing one of these awareness to movements at the time, and I thought, wait a minute, if this is true for a human, could it work for a horse? What could I do that would be a non-habitual movement? And the thing what went through my head, and I'm sure some of you have done this, like I thought of all the times I taught a horse to go on a lunge at the walk, trot, and canter. And after a few times, if you're smart and the horse gets it, but I would keep doing it for several weeks just to make sure, because the word, in the hood was, listen, horses are slow learners and you have to repeat everything until they really get it. Truly not my experience, actually. When you bring them into the body and get over the fear, and we take them beyond instinct to be able to actually think. And in Germany at the time, I remember writing an article about how we're more interested in influencing a few pounds of brain of a horse than 1,000+ pounds of body. And one of these big Arabian horse breeders at the time said, Mrs. Tellington Jones, I said, we want a horse to be more intelligent. And she said, only humans can be intelligent. Now, what's important for you all to know is that I refer to this work to a third definition of intelligence, which is the ability to adapt to new situations. That is very different from intellect. And that's what we do with these horses. So to go on for this mare, this is a horse. Her name was Minnie, but I didn't like that name. I don't remember what we called her, but we really pay attention to names. And Christine, you forgot to say that mare that you took home, we named her Diane, right? But she had a really negative German name that was hard to say. And the horse's name makes a difference. It really makes a difference how we see them. And let's see, with this horse, now one of the things that we don't do today, it's really rare that we use a chain. And I'd never use a chain on a horse that's sensitive. We use we call it a zephyr lead, because it's too much for them. But the advantage of it with a horse that isn't sensitive, like this mare, is that they are really light in the hand. And it's not because it hurts them, because it's weight heavy and they can feel it. But we have developed a whole different way now. So look at this horse. She came because she had put her owner on the ground. And I mean, she would just, she spooked. She was the kind of horse that startled, and she would just flip to the side, just take a leap to the side, and the person would land on the ground. Now here, look at her face. All I'm doing is putting my hand on the girth. Look there, and you see, she's not kicking at me. She's like, oh my God, don't touch me. You can see, if you look carefully, you see my hand right behind her front leg. And this is why one of the things that we do now, which of course wasn't part of this, is we go over the whole horse so that you can touch them anywhere, and not because they are flooded, but because we bring them into the body. And that's what this 1 1/4 circle can do. But we didn't have those yet. We didn't have the 1 1/4 circles, and it's like magic. So this is what the mare was like after, I can't remember if she was in the 2 or 3 weeks, but we found places that she loved to be worked on the body, and she's standing squarely. And also this business of turning a horse's head like this is something quite different from what this exercise where you take a carrot and get them to reach back for it. That is completely different. That's a flexibility, but this is to bring them into balance. And then keeping the head straight like that, not tipping the nose under, is really gets them so that they can look behind them and not spin around if something scares them. It's very effective. Now I'm going to go to this next horse, Rex. And this was a horse that was sent because he was dangerously spooky. Any kind of he was a horse that they rode out on the trail, and if he saw a piece of plastic, he would just bolt. And this is working him from the saddle around all the obstacles. And we like to work horses together. They were much happier when they work together through the barrels, over the stuff, and just being there. And this is Roger. Now, this is one thing we don't do anymore. Look at this horse spooking. Oops. How do I get this up here? There. Just letting him look at a piece of plastic lying on the ground. You see that all over the place. And we don't do that anymore because it's so scary to horses if they step on that. And what happens is they leap up in the air. And if you're in the way, they'll land on you. You're the safe spot. So an Arab mare taught me another way of doing this years later in southern Germany at an Arab mare that wouldn't go near one. And I've watched a clinician a few years ago in a clinic try to get a horse over one of these, plastic. And it was so sad for the horse. And I felt really bad for the clinician because he just kept, lunging the horse over it, whacking in, whipping him, couldn't step over it. So instead of doing that or getting that in that position at all, to get horses over fear of plastic on the ground, we take 2 strips of plastic and we make a big V out of it. And we make it far enough apart that they can walk through it without any fear. And it might be pretty wide apart at first, and giving them a sense of the body first before you go through it. That's what we do today. So they're not throwing the head up and, holding their breath and tightening the tail. But this worked with him. And this is Roger. This is the other thing all the horses had to do. They had to stay back because these were horses that people would ride out on the trail. Many of them, they weren't all, some were jumpers and sport horses, but many of them were just trail horses. And they wanted to be able to get off and keep the horse to stay back. And this is what they all had to do. Let's try. And this is Christine going under the plastic without nothing on the head. This is another thing. Every horse in the course had to go through all the obstacles just beside you like that with nothing on. And we don't, I never use plastic like this anymore. We break it down, chunk it down, and start with pool noodles. They're cheap and easy, and horses aren't afraid of it. And sometimes even with those, sometimes you have to hold them straight up, or sometimes you have to step off the platforms that we're standing on, because we want horses to go under things without any fear of what's above them. Let's see, where are we here? Yeah. So, Christine, do you remember anything about Rex?
Yeah, just that he was like really spooky about anything that moved. And when we first started working with him, that you were always kind of looking for what could be there that he could spook at. But yeah, he was a fun horse because he got so much better.
Do you remember that, Roger?
Sure, I remember basically all of the horses. I remember the horse renamed Misty. She couldn't stand still for a second in the ring, and one of her exercises was just stand in the middle of the ring while we were working with all the other horses and not lift a single foot. It took her 3 weeks to learn it, but when her owner came back, they basically didn't even, in a certain way, they didn't believe that was their horse. It was really just, they were shocked.
And the thing you have to understand, you all, we never get there by running them around or making them tired. We don't learn through fatigue. We learn by chunking it down, listening to the horse. If something scares them, we find a way to do it in a whole other way so it's not scary. We just keep breaking it down. And that's the influence of neurolinguistic programming, chunking down and making it possible that the horse can stay with us without fear. And to advertise this on Facebook, I forgot to put this in. There was a really great picture of Christine trotting over those trot poles with this horse beside her, with nothing on his head and a plastic raincoat on his back. Horses are so appreciative. Now this horse, I want to read this to you. This is the description of this. This is Kaishan. He was gelded late and he was very steady. I mean, screaming at all the other horses. He would get around a mare and really defend her, or if he was being ridden out with other horses, he would suddenly just launch himself at another horse. His rider was terrified of this horse for good reason. And he was so sore in the body. Good God. I remember, it's written here, I wouldn't remember it all, but he said, the book says that when I just checked him just behind the withers, he dropped his back so much. It looked to me, when I look back, like kissing spine, but nobody talked about that in those days. And he would throw his head up and onto the left, and his whole neck would bulge. Now, this is one of the exercises that he had to do. Also, they all had to do this. Like, we have a picture somewhere, and it's not in the book, of us. I think there are like 4 barrels beside each other, and each person is sitting on the barrel, and the horse is just standing there in front of them, but they don't have a halter on. This would have been in the beginning part of the training. And again, they're never punished if they move, because it doesn't make sense. It's, wait a minute. And I tell you what I realized today that we need to be talking about, because this is quantum science. It's the thought we hold. It's the energy we have, because it's now known that energy is every thought we have, every feeling, every emotion, every belief. And Roger, the thing with that horse that first day, I just recently realized it and wrote about it. When I went out and worked on that horse, at the end of that second day of our class, I did many of the moves that are in our first book on massage for horses that we've been doing for 15 years, but we never considered the fact that you could change personality or behavior by working on the body. It never crossed my mind. But what I did was the same movements of the legs, but with the intention of activating new neural pathways to the brain. And it's the intention, I believe, that makes a difference. Our intention here was to find a way to have these horses be safe and rideable without using dominance or force, but being clear, giving them clear boundaries and being fair. And it worked. It was pretty amazing. This is the horse during the time. Now, the training bit made a huge difference. The Western saddle made a huge difference for this horse's back. And this, of course, is before we do the lick of the cow's tongue and so much of what we do now to bring the horses into the body. But just look at, he's trotting with his eyes closed. And one of the things in the book, it said he would see another horse and just scream at them and launch himself. And when I think of his behavior now, I read about it, he sounds like he was a crypt orchid, that maybe they only got one testicle, because his behavior was so extreme. Now, these are some of the things we did, leading them over plastic and bringing the head down. And we did a lot with body language. And look at his ears, they're up. He's present with her. And this is going over, like going through all the things now, just following her, just being with her. Now, this is another horse, and this is an exercise we do a lot, but we don't do it like this. Do not do this, because if that horse pulls back, or if that person trips or stumbles, this is not good. So what we do, the person bringing the horse through this, never stays in the poles with them. We go on the outside and just get the horse, on the long lead to go over it. Always look for safety. And this is, it's another thing we did with these horses. We took them out. We had wonderful riding areas around the area. sand roads and trails, and we could go across the fields that were, then cut. And some of the horses were worked in hand like this, because this, I don't know who this is, but this horse obviously wasn't ready to ride out in a group, but we would work them in a group so they got used to it. And the driving made a huge difference. And you can do this with any horse. We often, part of the ground driving is just a different experience. Let's see, and I would just, I'm going to go to the next slide. This is a basis of our philosophy for working horses today. It's, if you want to change your horse, you have to change your mind and hold the image that you want rather than focusing on what they don't do, what you don't want. And this is ways that you must hold the intent. Here it says, hold the intention of what you want rather than dwelling on what you don't want. Now, the thing is, this isn't like magic. You can just say, oh, I wish it was like that. What we have is the concept. We've got the work on the ground with all these things that we do. We've got these leading exercises that teach a horse to keep a 4-foot distance and to go in a straight line with us. And instead of lunging horses in circles, we lunge them in ovals. So the horse goes on a straight line and then a half curve and a straight line. And doing all these things, and then all the work on the body to ground them, to bring them into the body. And my interest, and I think all the people who work with me, I want the horse to have as good a time with me as I have with them in the end. And that means finding ways to make them safe and confident and grounded. So, this heart hug, I'd like to end with. I'm just doing something that's called, a master class. It's not a master class because you have to know everything. It's because you're talking to someone about who's mastered this work. Still learning, though, you must all understand. I'm going to move this up. Now, this is in Italy, sitting on a horse that was in the class, and I'm doing a heart hug. And I'd like you just to try this. Put one hand over the other on your chest and imagine a circle there. Actually, the circle is an imaginary clock that you're going to take off the wall and put it on your chest. And the reason you're going to do that, when you imagine that clock, that imagining activates your right brain. And your right brain is responsible for your feelings. And after COVID, we really need this. It's responsible for your creativity. It's responsible for your intuition and your compassion. And we humans need compassion. Why take a clock? Because the clock have numbers, and you put these imaginary numbers on the clock with the 6 toward the ground, the 9 toward your right shoulder, 12 toward your chin, and 3 toward your left shoulder. Why do I say it like that? Because numbers activate the logical part of the brain, and methods activate also your logic. And we couldn't be here together if we weren't logical. So when you combine the two with these 1 1/4 circles now that are now one of the many aspects of the TTouch, it just gives you an opportunity to be in that space of whole brain activity and learning. And that's what we can do with our horses. So for those of you who don't know the work, this is the latest book that I did with my niece Mandy, Training and Retraining Horses. And it's got all these wonderful cases in it and all the ways to use the ground exercises and the work on the body and the philosophy. And it's really fun. And this is, you must have seen this. You must be here because of Facebook. We also have a community if you join for $9.99 a month, and you get all kinds of tips from us and the whole library that has so many of my webinars and videos in it. And it's a great opportunity to be with like-minded people. And I just wanted to end with this. It's about mastering the relationship with your horse, cell to cell, heart to heart, and soul to soul. So, my dears, I hope wherever you are that you'll enjoy the rest of your day or your evening. And it's really been fun for me to be here with all of you. And I would like to, I'm going to end the recording here, and I'm going to ask if anybody has any comments or questions. I'm just going to stop the recording.